How do you think the royal family and the king are going to react to this? There's two things I want to ask you about, Kate. Money, but also his statement that he made, to, basically criticising the king's court. But if, it's going to cost him a lot of money. Potentially, people are talking 50 million, but I think there might be something in there saying that the costs are going to be limited or split.
And it depends on how much the insurer will actually cover. And the insurer could look at some of those statute of limitations and say, this should have never been brought to court in the first place, so we refuse to actually honour this.
Well, there's always a clause, isn't there, with insurance?
Yes.
And if you take out insurance, they will want to know that, the lawyers did the very best due diligence they could before bringing the case forward.
And the judge specifically says some of this stuff shouldn't have been presented to me in the first place. So the insurers absolutely could say, no, we're not going to cover that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a big chunk of change, isn't it? Because the Daily Mail group is suggesting that it's £50 million. Now, we understand that Hacked Off has a big pot of cash to help fund some of these litigations against the press. So how much of that they will cover, we don't know. It's hard to figure out quite how wealthy Harry is. Obviously, he had a big inheritance from his late mother, and if that had been invested wisely, that would be a lovely nest egg for him. We know that when they bought the house in Montecito, they have a mortgage on that house. It wasn't bought outright. We don't know quite how successful Meghan's brand has been because the accounts aren't published. Ditto Archwell Media and all their other arms of their financial freedom that they went off to find in America. So it's hard to see, but I mean, in terms of, Harry as a brand, it's not helpful because this is the week, Invictus Games is such a feather in his cap. It's something that really, it's very hard to criticise because he's done a brilliant job with that. It's been going over 10 years. And next year it's going to be hosted in Birmingham in 2027. This was supposed to be a big hurrah for it. Perhaps the Duchess would be by his side. Maybe the children would come and meet the King, but that all seems to have unravelled so quickly. And not just because of the High Court defeat, but because of the sort of, like we discussed, the toing and froing over where he would stay.
It's the noise that he brings drowns out any other messaging that the King and the Queen and William have been out this week, or any messaging that he wants to do with his Invictus Games. His just general appearance and messing things up, that stops everything else being heard. Well, I think. But on the money, is there a danger that the King that you might have to ask his father to help out?
Well, based on what you're saying, I just want to stress. Dr. Sophie Shandaka has said everything you said, and Harry's currently being sued by Senabale. Am
I going to be sued for saying that?
No. My point is that Harry and Meghan are a distraction from the causes that they attach themselves to, that they even build and create. They've become this toxic entity that turns fundraisers away, that turns donations away. And, somebody seriously needs to have a come to Jesus with them and say, you need to behave by the book. But will he have to ask his dad for money? We know King Charles said he felt like an ATM, and he's refused to take, according to Robert Jobson, refused to take Harry's phone calls in the past because Harry's asked for money. I don't think that it'll go down that road, but I do think that you've made a very good point that when it comes to Invictus and other causes, the distraction that Harry and Meghan brings, it ultimately jeopardizes really great causes that are suffering.
Invictus Games must be, and I'm not going to speak for them, and I haven't asked them, but there must be people there sitting on for Invictus Games quite furious about this.
I will say I've heard it. I've heard it. I have heard that leadership at Invictus is very concerned about Meghan Markle's presence, that it becomes the Meghan Markle show. Why are you changing your outfits 3 or 4 times for a one-day visit? It seems like this is a catwalk for you while you've got injured veterans, that are competing and trying to show that there's life after such a traumatic event. I have heard that Invictus leadership is frustrated and stressed with the Sussexes.
What about the King? Do you think he's frustrated with the Sussexes? We just mentioned there about his statement that he did with Baroness Lawrence, where he accused it of a whitewash and basically criticised the court. How's he going to cope with this?
This is what they feared, wasn't it? That after the judgment, Harry would come out with something and it would threaten the King's constitutional role if Harry was delivering those sorts of statements against the King's courts, essentially, and the justice system from under a sovereign's roof within Buckingham Palace. Now, We remember last year when he lost his case against the Home Office in the Court of Appeal, he described it as good old-fashioned establishment stitch-up, didn't he? So it's very hard for the king to he's put the king in a really difficult position with this statement because, if Charles meets him this week, he'll be linked to the case whether he wants it or not. The Daily Mail has a front page this morning saying vindicated. This won't be the last of it. They'll have a week of stories like this, I expect. So as this rumbles on, people are still talking about the case and what it means, not just for that particular newspaper group, but for the freedom of the press more generally. I think it's put Charles in a very difficult position as to how he goes about meeting Harry, if indeed he will meet him. But as we've said, I think that the king, friends of the king have said to me, he's a patient man, he's a compassionate man, but, he does, like everybody, has a limit. And you push him beyond that and you're going to find out about it.
Have we reached the limit, do you think, after what we've seen the last 24, 48 hours?
I think no. I think the king will always be very fond of Harry and he will always love his son and always want to see his grandchildren. I don't think that's going to change. But, like all parents and children, there are points when you just think, go to your room, I don't want to see you. I don't think this is the kind of royal equivalent, despite the fact that he's over 40 years old and says he wants to be reconciled with his father, and yet we have these briefing wars, essentially.
I almost feel more sorry, this is horrible to admit, but I almost feel more sorry for King Charles than Thomas Markle, because it feels like there is the constant tease of a potential reunion between Charles and his grandchildren, and with Thomas Markle, it's just cold. So I do kind of feel sorry for the king because maybe he is anticipating seeing these children. Maybe he is excited. Thomas Markle has no expectation whatsoever. And it might be humiliating for him, too, when things like this don't work out after the whole world has been hyping up this major, reconciliation.
But how hard can it be? I keep asking the same question. How hard can it be for they're both in London for 2 or 3 days? How hard can it be for them just to quietly go and have a cup of tea together?
I don't know. I've been trying to book you on my show for a while.
It seems to be very hard, though, doesn't it? I think it seems to be unnecessarily hard. And, people I know who I've been speaking to, sources saying that actually, if Harry truly wanted reconciliation, he really wanted to spend time with the king, who, as we know, is still living with cancer, there might be a better way to go about these things. Private conversations behind the scenes, being courteous and saying, yes, Dad, I will take that kind offer of accommodation up, and getting back to him in due course. And I just think that there are better ways that Harry could go about it. But, as the editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail said, he seems like he said, poor Harry, he seems very angry. And he sort of...
I've got the quote here, Kate, if you want. This is Paul Dacre, because I've got it here because I thought...
Yes, great, yeah.
He says, Prince Harry wrote a sad book which boasted about his killing of 25 Taliban, his drug-taking and in cringe-making detail how he lost his virginity. There isn't a laundry in the cosmos big enough to wash all the dirty linen he has aired about his own family. For him to complain about his privacy being invaded takes not only the biscuit but the whole tin. Poor Harry... I feel sorry for the way a confused and angry young man has been drawn into this case. When I read that, it struck a chord because I thought, well, is he poor Harry? Has he kind of been misled in the last couple of years into the situation he is at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't seem like somebody who really knows what he's doing. I think that's, he does look to be thrashing around. In his memoir, Spare, he talks about going to visit Sir Elton John and David Furnish at their home in France and meeting David Sherborne, who is the barrister.
By accident.
Yeah, who said, why don't you hire your own lawyer? And, this is a kind of light bulb moment for Harry, who had been at that point very frustrated by the palace not putting out his side of the story when they've seen reports in the press that he didn't like or that he said were false. So it's interesting because, the people that only really seem to have benefited from this very long, very costly litigation are the lawyers.
Poor Harry?
No. I mean, I've been watching the Prince and Princess of Wales this week. They look totally unbothered. They are thriving. And, I think it's a result of never complain, never explain. they're not weighed down by the tsunami of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and they ignore negative headlines. We don't see William fighting back on these new accusations that he's not going to move into Buckingham Palace one day. He has to live in a castle. You know, there are all sorts of work shy Willie. He just ignores it and continues to show up with a smile on his face. And I think that that's why the public is truly, attracted to this couple and adores this couple, because they stay above the fray. I think Harry wallows in the past, and it's one of the reasons why he's not thriving today, because he can't let go of things that happened 20 years ago.
Is there any way of Harry is he able to turn it around this week?
No. I don't think there's any way for him to turn it around. I mean, I've heard people say you can get the sympathetic headlines by going to Althorpe and visiting Diana's grave with the children. I mean, maybe you will get some. People magazine will lean into that. If he got a photograph with his father, that would absolutely change the narrative, but I don't think that that's a possibility.